Hi there! During the Chiral Redundancy patch, Mika gives us free pulls on a special reunion procurement, essentially both a character and weapon selector, that guarantees you at least one copy of your choice. The banner includes characters up to and including the release of Rubella. So, in this video I want to quickly go over the available options, discuss their current and future value, as well as their optimal investment levels. Let's start with the Corrosion characters. Ever since Clukei's expansion key, the team is going strong again. Clukei is the team's main carry and a great V6 choice no matter your account state. She will simplify your life on mobbing stages and still does impressive damage numbers in boss battles. If you've pulled Clukei in the past and got stuck somewhere on a mid-level investment, she might be your highest value pull on this banner. If you don't have her at all, it's probably not worth picking up just a single copy. Her power really only unlocks at V6. Lynn's value is directly tied to Clukei. She works fine at V0 and is on the team for her defense shred and to trigger Clukei's dots via her ultimate. The latter feeds into boosting Clukei's expansion key, making the pair inseparable. If you have a V6 Clukei or borrow one from your friends in Gunsmoke, consider picking up a copy of Lind. Both Clukei and Lind remain core members of the Corrosion team to this day, although Lind is replaceable if you have higher investment in other Corrosion characters. Midge on the other hand doesn't see much play anymore. Ever since Busty's release, she is only relevant as a support for a V6 Faetusa due to her superior amplification of AoE support actions. But even then, we now have both OTS 14 and Nemesis Gnosis, so the Corrosion roster is getting quite crowded. Overall, Midge is a safe skip at this point. Continuing with the freeze characters. Rubella used to be the V6 main DPS of the team, but outside of prolonged boss fights she wasn't offering enough value. With Soppor's imminent release, the team will see a rise to power. None of these characters are high priority pulls, but if you intend to get Soppor and have or want to get Alva as well, you may consider picking up one copy of Rubella to build a mono-freeze team. Unless you have a duped Macchiato, in which case you probably won't see much of an upgrade. Similarly, Dush is quite outdated at this point, but can still be used on the freeze team. If you have a V2 Lorelei, I wouldn't bother though. Both Macchiato and Suomi are not worth it anymore. Macchiato will receive a decent second expansion key in the future, but that's mostly adding value for players that pulled her in the past. Next up is the Hydro lineup. Springfield is still an exceptionally strong character and a core member of the team to this day. Since her expansion key and the release of Liu She, the team's been shifting to a summoner archetype. As of now, it's still a bit underwhelming, but with Middle and Kollida we have two very strong additions on the horizon. If you want to build a summoner team, you absolutely should get Springfield and push her at least to V1. If you have that already, you may also consider going for a V2, which will allow you to use her ultimate and S2 in the first round. Pulling more is only cost effective if you can push all the way to V6. That said, none of the other three available characters are really worth it at this point. As of now, Florence can still be used on the team, but her days are numbered. With Springfield, Mitchell and Kollida and OTS 14, you only have one spot left on the lineup, for which Liu She or Tolu with the second expansion key will have priority over Florence. Similarly, Nikita gets booted off the team as soon as Middle arrives, since she doesn't really synergize with the team's new direction. She and Zawe are safe skips. Moving on to the electric element. With the exception of Sextons, you can obtain the entire roster from this banner. Unfortunately, many of them are outdated at this point. There's also no other electric doll coming up, so there's no foresight to guide your decision. If you don't have an invested lever, or one you can borrow from a platoon, there's probably little reason to invest in the element. That said, if you pulled Sextons and want to build an electric team anyway, you would want to have at least lever and Jiangyu for a functional core. Assuming you can borrow a V6 lever, Jiangyu would be the better choice to pull here, as she can get the team going without further investment. Another slot is filled by OTS 14, leaving the final spot to either Andorus or Blade user. If you have the electric core but skipped Andorus in the past, you could pick her up for a synergy with Lever, but with an invested Sextons I'd mix elements and slot in Faetusa instead. Lena is out of the team, not to mention that she'd need her V1 to function, and Belka, unfortunately, never saw the light of day. Next are the burn characters. While Chiwa is the de facto main carry of the team, her mechanics are quite restrictive and don't synergize well with OTS 14. Investing heavily into her wouldn't make much sense at this point, and your resources would be better spent on Lewis. Since there's no point in using her at V0, it's better to borrow her from someone else. Assuming you build a team around her, Vector is still valuable. She should be at least V1. Her V2 is also beneficial with her expansion key, granting you permanent uptime of Blazing Assault, but only if you don't have Lorelei's signature weapon. If you don't have Vector at all, that's probably better to skip. Perry and Centauracia are not worth it, though the latter receives her second expansion key in the upcoming CN patch. If you're interested in her new performance, you'll have to wait until next week before pulling the trigger. Lastly, the physical characters. Yui is the core of the team and necessary if you want to build a lineup for this cursed typing. Except for Voimastina, everyone else relies on her to provide defense shredding. That said, the physical team is falling off now that OTS 14 shakes up the meta. If you didn't pull Yui before, you probably also don't have any invested physical damage dealers, so there's no reason to start now. But if you do have an invested Che or Voi, Yui should be at least V1 to increase the speed at which she stacks her defense penetration buff. Her V2 and V3 also add decent value, making her more of a generic support character, with good uptime on attack up 2 and debuff cleansing. Then, Alred is worth picking up if you're interested in a Blade team. On the physical team she only sees play if you're missing higher priority characters, but her synergy with Sextons still gives her value. Assuming you're invested in Sextons or have access to one from your friends, Alred is a decent choice. She's good enough at V0, the optimal at V4. If you have Alred already at V0, I'd say 3 more copies is too big of an ask though. Similarly to Alred, Diane doesn't have much of a place on the physical team anymore. She's still fairly strong at baseline, but there are simply too many options for the team. If you skipped Lainey and need a 5th member to fill the spot, I'd prioritize Alred over Diane due to her dual role. In conclusion, the highest priority pulls are Kluke and Springfield. Both have received extremely strong expansion keys, making them irreplaceable on their respective lineups. Kluke needs to be highly invested though, so if V6 is out of reach for you, you're better off borrowing her when possible. Either way, if you have access to a V6 Kluke, Lind is a worthwhile addition. She is functional at baseline and boosts Kluke's output significantly. Alternatively, if you're willing to invest in the upcoming Hydro characters Mytl and Kolleda, you may want to prioritize Springfield over the Corrosion core. She is essential for the team and needs to be at least V1. Consider pushing for more upgrades if you're there already. If you're good on the Corrosion and Hydro front, you may want to look to rounding off the Freeze or Electric teams. If you're going to pick up Soppo, Robella isn't a bad choice. She's not as essential as Alva, Soppo and OTS 14 though. If you're invested in Macchiato in the past, there's little reason to switch to a V0 Robella. Jangyu on the other hand is a core Electric member and fully functional at V0. The element has lower priority than Freeze, but assuming you have both Sextons and Lever, she's a reasonable choice, especially if at least one of the two is invested. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a new Electric doll in quite some time, so you're in for a dry spell. Lastly, the physical options. Yui is still a strong generic support character and the absolutely essential core of the physical team. If you don't have her yet and want to remedy that, she should be V1 at least. If you have all the other options here, you may also consider pushing her a little further. She gains value up to V3. Given how the physical typing is falling off in the meta, I'd not prioritize her anymore though. Alred is a valid choice if you picked up Sextons and are interested in her role on a Blade/melee focused lineup. She's good at baseline and can also work as a filler on the physical lineup, assuming you skipped Lainey or one of the damage dealers. Finally, let's briefly address the weapon options. Generally speaking, I'd prioritize support over DPS weapons, as they often add more value by boosting an entire lineup. The best weapon from the selector is Springfield's, as it makes her apply a 15% attack bonus to all allies when using her as 2, resulting in permanent uptime of the buff. If you have it already, Yui's weapon would be the next best choice. It grants active physical attacks 10% defense ignore, which can be the missing few percentage points for Voi or Che when trying to reach a defense penetration threshold. If you have both of these, you could go further down the list of support weapons with reasonable value, for instance Vector's or Florence's signature weapons, assuming you have the characters. Alternatively, there are a few DPS options that are still worth considering. If you pick up Alred, I'd strongly suggest getting her blade as well. The trait provides her an additional confectance point per turn, which is essential for her rotation. Then, Macchiato's Bittersweet Caramel is a quite strong and generic rifle due to the defense penetration from the weapon trait. It is often competitive or even superior to signature weapons of other snipers. Lastly, if you have all of these options or don't own the corresponding characters, you could just grab a signature weapon of an invested DPS you do own. For instance, Kluke's or Chiro's weapons provide reasonable upgrades over free-to-play alternatives. That should do it for this one. I hope the scope of this overview was enough to guide your decision process. As always, leave a comment to let me know which character and weapon you're going for. Personally, I'm heavily leaning towards picking up that Alred and her weapon for a melee team, though I wouldn't mind finally having a Bittersweet Caramel to pass around. In any case, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.